Uh-huh.
Celery.
Oh, gosh. Uh,
It's last. I think next Friday I see him, and Jenny told me to ask him for a flipper, which I guess is a temporary teeth to come.
uh-huh.
Well, she'll be here. She's getting the kids. She's getting the kids. We're watching them, and they spent the night. So, and with Josh and Allison, we didn't think they'd like the party.
You're way back there, Mary.
She was the last person to leave the party.
Oh, my goodness. You were not.
No, Chris left after you.
Christine? Okay, well, I guess we can start. Is there anything about Holy Week, Lent, Easter, any of that stuff you want to talk about? No?
I've never been to a service other than Easter Sunday,
Uh-huh,
and I came to the Friday night
uh-huh.
vigil. But, man, that's a marathon that week.
Yeah, it really, really is.
For people, for you especially.
Yeah.
For people that attend everything.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. So, yeah. There are, yeah, there's 7 lessons plus the epistle plus the gospel, so they're 9 altogether. So we only did 5. Yeah. we only did 5. Yeah, I did. Yeah. That's the first time I did it, and I couldn't figure out why I was leaning in that direction, other than the fact that I was reading about Isaac, and I learned some things I didn't know about Isaac, and so I felt like if I didn't know about him, probably other people didn't know about it, and so, so I decided, well, I've never talked about those Old Testament readings, and perhaps this was the year. And then I realized it really was because it was the year that Andrew died was this year. And the readings were just hitting too close to home. And so it was self-protection, I think. Okay. Well, what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about the church and the church structure, and to talk a little bit about the presiding bishop, and to talk about our candidates for the bishop, for the new presiding bishop, and how the person is chosen. This year it will be a he. This year it will be a he. And answer any questions you have.
So they don't allow write-ins.
They do allow write-ins. They do actually allow write-ins. They have to come in after the slate is announced. Then they do allow write-ins for a space of time. I think it's a couple of weeks. So within this week and next week, I think, they do allow write-ins. No. I'm too old. You have to be 9 years younger than 72. So you can't turn retirement age during the time that you're the presiding bishop.
So that's the term, 9 years.
The term is 9 years, yes. So it's 3 convention cycles. And so you're elected, then you do 2 other cycles, and then you're out. And you could be, if you're young enough when you're elected, you could be elected for another 9 years. So,
So two things I'd like to know is, and you can fit it in where it
Uh-huh.
belongs, but who does the selecting? And then who does the awarding of the job?
okay. When the selecting, they've been, over the last year, they've been taking names. So people have been submitting people that they thought might be good. And you have to have permission of the person before you can submit their names. And they've been culling those names over about the last year. And they got it down to
Who does that?
the deputies of the convention. So when you have the general convention, you have a group of laity and clergy that elect people, and they're sent from their diocese. So we'll send different deputies, and they'll be both laity and clergy. And then bishops. So both groups of people participate in the electing of the presiding bishop. And between conventions, then they have the staff of the staff of the office in New York. They have the head deputy, main deputy. She stays pretty much on staff, and she essentially runs the office and oversees those kinds of collecting of the names and so she would function a lot like Mary does, okay? And then they establish a committee to collect the names and to go through the names and to cull out who they think, yes, this would work, no, that would work, would not work. And so it's like a search committee would function in a parish.
Out of the various general committees or general council, whatever.
Yeah, so the whole church can submit names during a certain space of time, and then that search committee for that gets named by the presiding bishop and the leadership of the church, the House of Deputies, they get named to be a search committee, and usually it's the people that are pretty active in the upper echelons that get chosen for that search committee. But you can kind of apply if you,
No clergy.
no, clergy and lay.
Are the candidates just from the U.S.?
No.
That's the tradition.
No, it can be any place in the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church, it used to be called the Protestant Episcopal Church of the United States, and the name was changed to the Episcopal Church, TEC. So if you look at if you look at like the 1928 prayer book, you're going to see the Protestant Episcopal Church of the United States, because it really was located in the United States. But now there are other dioceses. There are 9 provinces, the United States and other places across the globe are part of the Episcopal Church. There are 9 sections of the country that are sectioned off regionally, and then different parts of the world. So like Cuba has a diocese that's part of the Episcopal Church. Guam has a diocese that's part of the Episcopal Church. And there are various parts of the world that are part of the Episcopal Church.
Canada Anglican?
Canada has an Anglican Church of Canada. So it's part of the Anglican Communion, but it has its own church just like we do. Okay?
So there would be no Episcopal church in Canada.
Well, we're an Anglican church too. Yeah, but we call ourselves Episcopal because that's the name we chose when we formed. And we chose it in large part because the United States was the first church to break away from the Church of England. Okay? And we broke away because of the Revolutionary War, and priests had to take a vow of submission to the king. And when the Revolutionary War happened, you couldn't take that vow any longer. And so you had to restructure, you had to reform the church. And so the church in the United States chose the Protestant Episcopal Church of the United States to make clear that because our worship is so similar to Catholic, they wanted to make clear to the country that this is a Protestant church. It's not a Catholic church. It may look like a Catholic church in its worship, but it's not. It's a Protestant church. And they chose the word Episcopal because they didn't want to choose Anglican because that indicates England. And it's too close, and they wanted that separation. They wanted that break. And they chose Episcopal because they wanted it made clear that the church in America was in the direct line of succession, just like the Church of England was, direct line of succession with bishops. So our bishops are in the same line all the way back to Peter. Now, Roman Catholics will argue that. They'll say, no, you're not. You know, once you broke, you broke. And then they say, and once you ordained women, that was the end of it. You know, even if you had it, you know, even if that were true, once women came into the picture, that was the end of any kind of line of succession. But Episcopalians will go to their death saying we're in that Episcopal line of succession all the way back to Peter. And we're one of the only churches, the Anglican Communion is one of the only churches that can say that. Because when the Church of England broke away, they kept their bishops. Okay? Luther didn't keep his bishops. You know, Luther established his own church. There were no bishops. Okay? John Calvin, when he established what became the Presbyterian Church, he established his church. There were no bishops. So those religious traditions did not keep that line of succession, but the Church of England did, because they had the Archbishop of Canterbury who could ordain and who could ordain in the line of succession. Go ahead.
Maybe a silly question, but during the Revolutionary War, was Baltimore/Maryland specifically, were they anti-Protestant Episcopal, and did they stay with the Roman Catholic Church and not have a diocese?
No, it was mixed. And there were a lot of, during the Revolution, most of the Anglicans were Tories. Because if you were an Anglican clergy person, you got your salary from England. Okay, so if anybody's seen Hamilton, there's Samuel Seabury standing on the platform on the box, trying to convince everybody to stay loyal to England, and Hamilton has an argument with Samuel Seabury. Samuel Seabury was the first person to be ordained a bishop, and you know they're having this argument because Seabury wanted to stay connected to England because he wanted to keep his salary. And if you broke, then you know there were no bishops to ordain any priests, so something was going to have to take place in order to have bishops in this country, so the church could continue. Because if you didn't have bishops to ordain priests, then it would die out.
So the presiding bishop is the equivalent to the Archbishop of Canterbury?
No. The Archbishop of Canterbury is like when the Church of England separated from Rome, and you want to think of it in those terms. The Church of England stopped paying money. They stopped paying their taxes to Rome, okay? And they stopped participating in the things that Rome declared that they had to do. And they stopped sending, they wouldn't participate in any of the Roman wars, okay? So essentially, they pulled away, and when Henry married Anne Boleyn, then the Roman Church said, you're excommunicated. But England didn't do anything. And then finally, they said, Henry's the head of the Church of England, okay? And so what was your question?
Pardon?
What was your question?
I just was wondering if the presiding bishop here was the
Okay.
equivalent to the archbishop.
No. So the Archbishop of Canterbury in England was the primate, okay? Henry is the head of the church, but you have to have a religious person leading the rituals and the church. And the Archbishop of Canterbury was the primate for the Church of England, okay? The prime priest, the main head high honcho bishop.
Isn't that what the presiding bishop is here?
No. So the Archbishop of Canterbury is the primate for the Church of England, okay? And when we broke off, then we had to have a primate here, and that's what the presiding bishop is. But we are we're in the Anglican Communion. We're part of this Church of England. After the Revolutionary War. Once relationships started to heal between America and England, then the churches started to heal. And we reconnected with the Church of England, and so we became part of what they call the Anglican Communion. So we stay connected, and we do things similar to what happens in England. So we say we're under, that the Archbishop of Canterbury is the head of all of the Anglican Communion, and each of the heads in each of the different parts of the world are primates in those particular places. So there's a primate in America, okay, and the countries that belong to the Episcopal Church. There are primates in South America. There are primates in Africa. There are primates in Europe, okay? And all of those groups are part of the Anglican Communion.
But independent.
Independent.
If the Archbishop of Canterbury tells our primate to do something, is he obligated?
No, but they tend to try to stay in sync with each other, and they do meet every 10 years together. And like when Gene Robinson was when he was ordained a bishop and he was gay, that blew up the Anglican Communion, because the bishops in Africa don't believe in ordaining gay anything. And so they had a big conniption fit, wanted to kick the Episcopal Church out of the Anglican Communion, because they said, you didn't get permission from the Anglican Communion to ordain Gene Robinson. And the Episcopal Church said, we don't need to get permission, because we're an independent church in collaboration with the Anglican Communion, but we're an independent church. And we got punished. We couldn't sit on certain committees for about 3 years. We couldn't do certain things in the Anglican Communion for a little while. But now we're reinstated, fully reinstated. Huh?
What year was that?
it was probably like, it was right around the time I was ordained, so it was probably around 2005, 6, 7, something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I learned from communications that he had with people I know that the African thing was not so much that they actually objected to that, but because they were getting so much pressure. Because so many people were turning to fundamentalist Muslim philosophies, and they felt like the church would die out if they agreed to it. So it wasn't like a personal objection to
That's-
it so much as the survival of their churches.
That's good to know. Yeah, yeah, that's good to know.
Because he had pretty serious talks with people before he did that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it shows the independence of each of the bodies, and that it really does make a difference, you know, who your presiding bishop is, who your primate is, but that we are in relationship with other groups, and we are part of the Church of England, you know. So we are Anglican, you know, but we don't in the Episcopal Church, we often don't use that terminology. We may, with regard to liturgy, a lot of times we'll use Anglican, but not necessarily with our polity.
You mentioned all the countries that have their presiding bishops. You did not mention Slavic countries, Asian countries, or Australia.
They all do. They all do. Yeah, they all do. Yeah, they do. And, you know, Anglican churches are across the globe. So they are. So in this country, Pennsylvania, the Diocese of Pennsylvania, was the first diocese. It was established as the first diocese. Bishop White was the first presiding bishop. So he was the bishop in Pennsylvania and was elected as the first presiding bishop. He was not the first person to be ordained, though, from the United States. Samuel Seabury, the guy on the step having the fight with Hamilton, was the one. And he went to Scotland because the people in England wouldn't ordain a bishop because they were still mad about the war. And so they ended up having to go to Scotland, and Seabury was ordained in Scotland. And the stipulation was that they had to bring back the Scottish prayer book and allow the Scottish prayer book to influence the prayer book, our prayer book. So we've got both the English prayer book, the Cranmer prayer book. Archbishop Cranmer was the head of the, he was Archbishop of Canterbury that developed the English prayer book. So we've got that influencing our prayer book, but also we have elements of the Scottish prayer book in ours, and that really is important. Okay. With regard to the presiding bishop, like I said, it changes every 9 years. We have an election. The way every 3 years we have a general convention. So, and usually it's pretty, if you're, what can I say? If you're really active in the diocese, you tend to want to go to those general conventions. There's a lot of shifting and bumping to get elected to be able to go to those general conventions, because you have to be elected by our convention that we have in the fall in order to be able to go to conventions. So you have to be pretty well known in the diocese. You have to be pretty well liked in order to be elected by both the clergy and the laity to be able to go. So I've never really, I've never really been one that just died to go to the convention because they're long and boring. And exceedingly political, exceedingly. And long, 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. So, 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. So, so delegates are elected from each diocese to go. Clergy go. They're also elected. Not all clergy are delegates. So you combine laity and clergy and they become the House of Deputies, okay? And that's one group that meets. The House of Bishops, all bishops meet. And it can be both retired and active bishops. And there's some consternation about that. Some of the active bishops say the retired bishops shouldn't be able to come and vote. Because there's too many retired bishops messing up the messing up the voting. Okay, and so the retired bishops say we've done our time. We get to, you know, yeah. So we've done our time. We get to do what we want to do. So and they do, and they pretty much do. So that's pretty good. And every 3 years there is a convention, and they pass. Things like if there's any changes in the prayer book, it would have to go to the General Convention. Any language changes, any rituals, like the prayer that we're using right now comes out of a book called Enriching Our Worship. It had to go through 2 General Conventions before it could be passed. And everybody had to agree, both groups had to agree that it could go through. And that's Eucharistic prayer. So anything that's going to make a change, same-sex blessings, that's gone through multiple conventions. When they went from blessings to marriages, that went through multiple conventions with everybody having to agree. And so sometimes it can go through one, but then it has to come back and go through the second convention to make it.
But a majority, but to make a change, majority, just 51%?
It's a majority, but it's a majority of both houses. So when they vote for the presiding bishop, the way that they will vote is the bishops will go, it's sort of like a conclave, if you really want to, sort of like the Roman Catholics when all the cardinals go in, and you know there's no white smoke or anything, but they really do. They go into the church. They'll go into the cathedral in Louisville, and will close themselves off, so that nobody can come in, nobody can go out, and they begin the process of voting. And they move through the names. You know, they'll put a ballot out, and they'll vote. If there's a majority of the bishops that vote the first time, and you get a majority of the bishops, then there's an election. Okay, doesn't very often happen that way. Usually you get, like maybe one getting a significant number and then one getting practically nothing. And generally that one will drop out. And so then you have the next election with 3 candidates instead of 4. And they vote again. And one will drop out. So then you have 2. Okay? And you keep voting until you've got a majority of the House of Bishops, okay?
But you still have the other house.
Right. So once the bishops have chosen the person that they designate and that they say they want as the presiding bishop, then they have to take that name and take it to the House of Deputies, and the House of Deputies has to vote. So it's both clergy and lay, and they vote. I think they vote by orders as well. And so clergy have to vote, laity have to vote, and they add those numbers up. And it's only until you get both groups agreeing, and if they agree that they'll accept this candidate, when you get that, when you get all three groups, then you've got an election.
Those groups you're talking about, they're the selection committees for each of those groups, or are they every bishop?
It's every bishop, and with a House of Deputies, it's all of the people that Pennsylvania sends. There's clergy and there's laity that we send, okay? And they'll be in a group called the House of Deputies. Both clergy and laity sit in that House of Deputies. But occasionally they'll vote, and they call it voting by order. And so by order is the order of the laity, the order of the clergy. And so sometimes you vote, you stay within your order. The laity vote, the clergy vote. Most of the time they agree, but sometimes they don't. And a lot of times the laity are wiser than the clergy are. They really are. And occasionally in our diocesan conventions, the clergy sometimes will, in the later votes, will go in the direction of what the laity are how the laity are moving.
So once the 4 candidates are selected, the selection committee's job's done.
Yes, they'll help oversee, and they'll help introduce candidates, and they'll do the.
There's probably, they're members also of those 2 other groups.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But like this, our search committee here, when Bishop Gutierrez came, they participated in introducing him to different parts of the diocese, participating in the interviewing process and those kinds of things. And they'll have that kind of role.
So at the every 9 or 10 year convention, do they ever talk about, is this the way to do it, or should we look at something else?
To my knowledge, they've never talked about doing anything differently.
Basically, they like the way it's done.
Yeah. And, the way that it's, so we've got this election, we've got Bishop Gutierrez as a Hispanic man. We've got Robert Wright, who's coming from Atlanta, very, very active in racial justice, social justice, liturgy. We've got Sean Rowe, who is coming from, thank you, David, is coming from Pennsylvania, up close to New York, up to the New York border. We've got another person from, I think, one of the Dakotas, I think. And I don't know anything about him. So those 3 candidates, Wright and Sean Rowe, those are really strong candidates too. But Bishop Gutierrez, I really believe, is the strongest. And the reason I believe that is because he's moved around the world. He's gone to the Church of England. He's really good friends with the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's gone to Jerusalem. He's done a lot of activity with the bishop in Jerusalem. He's done a lot with the Global South. He's done his work with the Latino community is strong. And I think based on where we are as a church with the Latino population growing and the push, exploding, yeah. And I think it's the right time for the church to push forward that, yeah. And when Bishop Curry was elected, Ferguson, Missouri had just happened, so there had been a killing in Ferguson, And that was in the news at the time that Bishop Curry was elected. So we seem to go, the conventions seem to hit at times when the country, something is happening in the country. And then 9 years before that, that was when Katharine Jefferson Story was elected, so a female. And she ended up beating out the bishop that was in Kentucky. He also was a member. He was also in that slate. So he wasn't real thrilled with women when he came back home. So it was kind of hard to be ordained under him after he came back home. But I think it's those kinds of patterns that are happening, which is why I think they're not going to touch how they select people. And the other thing that since the last convention, one of the things that has happened is that the women in the church have made a strong move to push for women's ordination as bishops. I mean, they have gotten organized, and they have pushed to have women's names lifted up as candidates for ordination for bishops. And the number of women being ordained as bishops is astronomical, really. So the what do I want to say? The structure of the church, or the demographics of the House of Bishops has changed. It doesn't look like the House of Bishops that was there 9 years ago, because there's so many more women involved. And they talk about that therefore has changed the communication within the House of Bishops. It's changed the style within the House of Bishops. And, so which is another reason I don't think that they'll end up changing.
Yeah, but it's evolving, which is a good thing. It's from the bottom up kind of, as opposed to we're doing it this way.
That's
It's probably good.
I think that's right. And people, like with regard to the liturgy, which is where my interests go, they really are pushing to make sure that the liturgy doesn't stay stuck in the 1982 prayer book, that we continue to move our language so that our language is not always God he, God this, God that, but that our language moves with the time. And that we can pray in expansive terms, like what we're doing with this building, talking about inclusion, that our prayers have more inclusion, because the prayer book really doesn't. It's very straight and locked in. And Bishop Gutierrez was not really in favor of using a lot of the newer texts. And at our last year at our clergy conference, he was challenged by one of the speakers to step out and to be the diocese that would promote inclusive language. And so he's been doing a better job. So those kinds of things happen at the conventions as well. And there are kind of courageous people that stand up and push in ways that are maybe we wouldn't expect, or ways that do push the church forward.
I have a question about the election process. When you have the slate of 4 people,
Mm-hmm.
both houses are voting at the same time.
No.
So the bishops choose the one that they want, and then everyone has to agree with it.
Correct.
Huh.
Does it bounce back if the second group doesn't? And has that ever happened?
Not to my knowledge. Generally, the House of Deputies will go along with what the bishops want. And in large part, the bishops know each other because they go at least twice a year, I think 3 times a year. They gather in retreats, they gather in conferences together, and they work together on committees. So they have they really know each other pretty well. And so they have their finger more on the heartbeat of who might be a good leader. And both the clergy and the laity are not as connected as the bishops would be. So they tend to take the recommendation of what the bishops are saying. But if there was a stinker, I suspect that they may not go along. You know, as I've watched laity and clergy at our conventions, they've had some pretty rough fights back and forth when they've really disagreed. And like I said, sometimes the clergy has shifted in the direction of the laity, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing.
Have our delegates been chosen at this point?
All 4 have been chosen, and I don't know if they have any write-ins. So
You mean the delegates from our deputies, yeah.
our deputies were elected at the convention last year, and I'm not sure who they are. Yeah, but our deputies were elected, and more than likely they are, you know, the people on the standing committee, people, you know, that have worked in the offices and things like that. They're going to be those sorts of people. So, and I don't know who they are.
do you think it's on the website?
It might be. It really might be. So,
My mind just bounced back to the Revolutionary War.
Uh-huh.
And there's nothing to do with the election process, but it was a huge deal to have Michael Curry in the or coronation of the king, have him so involved.
it was a huge deal to have Michael Curry involved in that. It really was. And because exactly that. I mean, he was,
Is he the first?
Yeah.
Queen Elizabeth was there forever.
yeah. But he would not, I mean, he would not, there were no Americans that would have had that big of a role ever. And, you know, it was a huge deal to have him that involved. So, you know, there's the head of the Anglican Church in the Queen acknowledging the head of the Episcopal Church that broke away. So it was a huge deal. And the fact that his sermon was so well received, it was such a good sermon and so well received, was a very important thing. So he's going to be a hard act to follow as far as his preaching goes. You know? Huh? I mean, he really will be.
Because Gutierrez isn't known for his.
No, he's really not. He's worked really hard at it, though. I mean, not this year, but the last couple of years, he had gotten a lot better. This Chrism Mass, you could tell he was not with us. You know, he had already moved. So, but
If he's not elected, would he come back here?
yeah, he would come back here. That it wouldn't be fun.
At least you're not Hispanic.
Huh? At least I'm not. Right. If that would happen, I'm going to stay far, far. I'm really glad we're the farthest church, way far away. I've lived through that once, you know, with the bishop that had to come back home. And he didn't come back home for 6 months. He took a 6-month vacation. So And he was really unhappy, so. Any other questions? So the candidates are Robert Wright from Atlanta. And again, social justice, liturgy. So he's a good candidate. Sean Rowe from northern Pennsylvania, up near New York, up near the border with New York. And he's a very pastoral person. He's very kind. Particularly with clergy, he's very kind. And so I don't know what his managing skills would be with a big church, but he's a good bishop as far as working with the people. And then Bishop Gutierrez, and then the bishop from out west. Okay? So, and we just won't know. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I thought you were saying-
No, go ahead.
I'm just wondering what the role of the presiding bishop is, what the actual day-to-day responsibilities.
The presiding bishop really, he's the primate of the church. So his role is to interface with the Anglican communion. Okay, that's a big part of it. He functions as the leader in New York. So he's got the staff in New York that works on all of the governance of the Episcopal Church. So if there's any issue in the Episcopal Church, like if any bishop would get into trouble, he would be involved in that. Okay, he would be a visionary as far as setting the tone for how we're going to move forward. What are the priorities? Okay, so Bishop Curry, his priorities have been working on racial justice, so the beloved community. He's worked on unity. Okay, and he's worked on really the bringing people together. Okay, and he's done a lot of writing and preaching on that. But beloved community is really his thing, and racial justice. Okay, and so that's sort of his tone, and then that's essentially what he works toward. Okay, and then he travels. So he goes to every ordination of bishops, he's there. Okay, he goes for visitations just like bishops do. He goes to settle any problem or any issue in any part of the country, he's there. Okay, so he's got, it's kind of a functionary job, but it does have some meat to it. Okay, and when the Lambeth Conference comes around, when you go to England to meet with the Archbishop of Canterbury, he's the one that goes. Okay, along with some others, but he's the one that represents the Episcopal Church.
They don't seem to be really visible to people as us.
No, they don't. No, he was when he came for Bishop Gutierrez's ordination, but you had to go find him essentially. You had to be part of it. So no, unless you go seek him out and if you read and listen and that kind of thing, but no, they're not. It's the higher echelon really, but they do have influence on the church, very definitely, and setting the agenda of what the church is going to be for that 9 years. If Gutierrez would be elected, what would his agenda be? It would be inclusion, and it would be global. It would be global inclusion, and it would be a lot of Hispanic inclusion. And if you look at what he's done in this diocese, it's work with our convention is going to be with the poor. Think about what we've done in this parish, because he's taken a lot of what we've done in this parish and has transferred it to the diocese. So the Episcopal Church is a place of belonging. Watch for that to go up on the national website, because that came from here. And so it's going to be that kind of language. The Episcopal Church is a place of belonging. So belonging, inclusion for everybody. Okay? Okey-doke. So when it goes up on the website for the Episcopal Church, you're going to know you had a part in it. Okay? Okey-doke. We time?
We got 4 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Hey guys, how you doing? I haven't seen you in a while.
They had a sleepover with
Thanks.
their cousins, so I had to go pick them up.